Hi, my name's Joanne Hock. I'm a filmmaker and I'm based in North Carolina. I'm a writer, a director, and a cinematographer. And I've been doing this a long time since dinosaurs roamed the earth.
So, Joanne, you're a multi-Emmy award-winning writer, director, and cinematographer, like you mentioned. You've directed 6 feature films. You've worked alongside Academy Award-winning actors. Directed over 30 episodes of true crime television for major networks like Discovery, A&E, and Lifetime. You've produced award-winning documentaries, and really the list just keeps growing. I just want to say that it's an honor to be sitting here with you, and for all those watching, to learn a little bit more about your story and your mission and your impeccable work. Um, what was life like growing up?
Oh, my goodness. Wasn't expecting that. Growing up, I was always a curious kid, but I was kind of a loner. I would go in my room and draw and loved art and music and movies. And I think I knew when I was probably in seventh or eighth grade that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I didn't know how to, express that or dial that in specifically. I started out with doing a lot of animated films, old-fashioned cell animation or pixelation in camera with 8 millimeter, and then Super 8. And so I've always been kind of a little curious and a little creative and a little different. My mom always asked, "Are you just weird all the time?" And I would say, "Yes, ma'am, I am." So.
Your dad ran a movie theater, right?
It was my grandfather was
Grandfather.
he worked for Warner Brothers his entire career, and he managed the big palatial 5,000 seat theaters in Pittsburgh, and that's back in the day when they had the circuit tours and the vaudeville acts coming through the theaters, and he had a young assistant by the name of Gene Kelly, who was a aspiring dancer, and I remember hearing the story that one day Gene was thinking about going on to law school, and my grandfather said, "Why don't you try Hollywood first? And if that doesn't work out, you can come back, you can get your job here, and you can go on to law school." So he went out to the West Coast, and I think within 45 days he got booked on his first movie. So Gene Kelly never looked back, and my grandfather was pretty proud of that one. So it's kind of a tradition in the family to be vested in the theaters and the industry. My grandfather worked, my grandmother worked. She was his ticket taker, and so my dad, when he would get out of school, he'd go straight to the movie theater, and he grew up in the movies, watching them too.
Who were some people that inspired you growing up?
Inspired me. I love, 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 love Katharine Hepburn. She's just one of my favorites. I think she was just so bold and daring and obviously very, very talented, but I think she challenged the studio system. She wore pants long before women wore pants. She knew every role and every job on the film set, knew what everybody was doing, and I think that made her a better actress because she understood all the details in making a film. I think someone like that in today's age would be more along the lines of a Jessica Chastain, who's not only acting but producing and choosing the projects that she wants to work on. So yeah, definitely Katharine Hepburn was an inspiration to me.
Nice. How did your passion for storytelling first ignite?
It was something that kind of evolved. I started out on the ad agency side. My stories were 30 seconds long, and same thing with broadcast. Worked in broadcast television, so shorter stories. And then as opportunities presented themselves, smaller short documentary films. I worked for a really great guy by the name of Richard Aldridge, and Richard owned a studio in Bridge Productions and Carolina Production Services, and he also encouraged me to take on a lot of nonprofit work and pro bono work to help out the community. And by doing that, learned how to tell stories that made an impact. And Richard was just great. He gave me the tools and the access to motion picture film cameras and dollies and lights. And so he was a change agent and in this region, in this part of the country, and really helped the film industry really get its footing in North Carolina.
Nice. With the vast array of work that you touch, your true passion is feature film.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Um, I think as I've gotten a little older, and I'm certainly doing that, that feature films have opportunity to really dig into the character and the story, and have the opportunity to let something breathe, a moment breathe, and where you write a scene where nothing's spoken but it's seen, or you write a scene that takes a moment for the character to realize something and evolve within that moment. So I'm a big believer in I paid my bills doing the commercial and corporate work to get to where I am now, but all that work helped set me up for the longer form storytelling. I also love the documentary work. I'm working on a documentary right now, and I'm working on developing a couple of features right now and a limited series. So anytime I get a chance to tell stories is a great day. So I feel very blessed.
Have you always loved to write?
I do. I remember when I was in, I think it was seventh grade, when a teacher complimented something that I had written. And you cannot put a price on something like that. When you're in a classroom and a teacher acknowledges you, it's so impactful. And I remember her saying, "You really have a knack for this." And just by her saying that, I remember I gravitated toward it even more and became, I wanted to please her and do more writing. So I did a lot of that when I was young, and then adopted what I was writing and turned it into all sides of it, which is the visual side, the art direction side, and the cinematography side, and then the words. So it all blends into the final product. So I think that writing for screen's a little bit different than writing for the page, and that's why I think I like it so much, is because it really embraces the music, the characters, the words, the visuals, and all into one encompassing piece that you have to know when to leave the words out, and you have to know when to let the shot breathe. You have to know when to let the story reveal itself to the audience rather than shoving it in their face and being so on the nose. So it's been an evolution, and I've never said that I was a great writer, but I love to study Southern writers and kind of feel like I'm still learning and I'm still growing in that area.
It must be a pretty incredible feeling witnessing your words coming to life on set, in the edit bays, and ultimately taking an audience on an incredible journey. What's the impact on others that you're after with your films?
It's interesting because my personal projects, I feel like I'm trying to have a voice, but without standing up on a soapbox. I think that sometimes if you preach too loudly, people tend to close off. So I always have not ulterior motives, but certainly ideas that I want people to hear without jamming it down their throat. A lot of the films that I do happen to have a little bit of a spiritual side, a faith base. That's just who I am. I grew up in the Presbyterian church, and a lot of what I was taught growing up was being of service to others. And so if I could make a film that informs people or gives them some hope or gives them some ideas that are positive or impactful, or maybe even showing this is not a good choice for you, then I think I've accomplished my mission. But I'm not a hit people over the head with my spirituality. I embrace all walks of life, all walks of faith. But I do think that everybody should have a voice, and everybody should have an opportunity to say how they believe, but be respectful of others along the way. And so just because my beliefs are one way doesn't mean yours have to be that way. But I do feel like I try to lead by example, try to show people my heart and my ideas, and maybe hopefully down the road somebody comes to a good conclusion on their side.
Nice. You've been quoted saying that I've never spent a day where it felt like work when I'm behind the camera. It's such a wonderful place to be. Talk about the cinematographer in you and your love for being behind the camera.
I really have embraced it even more now. The camera is just an extension of me. It's my eyes. And I always love to do something that's unexpected because I think most people see the world like this and they're looking out and that's like a 50 millimeter lens or this is the world. But I love to look at it from this and way out there and from a high and a low. So my thinking is I like to explore life and I like to see things differently and not what I call as an anticipated or expected way. So the camera is kind of an extension of me by taking these different lenses. I love a shoot that I'll gravitate towards an 8 millimeter lens and a 400 millimeter lens. And so that takes you the gamut of, or a macro lens, which gets you into this little world. So I do think that cinematography is an extension of me in the way I see the world, but using the tools that I have that are available to me that I can afford to just be an extension of my eyes.
You started out in film, and I've heard people say that film has this classic aesthetic that's timeless. How was the transition from traditional film to today's modern digital imaging? What was that like for you?
Well, I resisted it at first. And in fact, my first company that I owned was called Emulsion Arts. And people don't know what emulsion is, but that was the base where the film was exposed to the light. And after a while, people go, emotion arts. No, it's not emotion, it's emulsion. And so after a while, I had to change the name because I switched reluctantly at first, but then started gravitating towards the digital acquisition. And part of it was it's price-based. It was cost more to shoot film. It slowed down the process because you had to send the film off to the labs and then get the negative report and then go into the telecine and do the color grading. And then you would do a work print and then you would do the edit and then you'd go back and color grade again and finesse things. So that was a very specific process. I wouldn't say cumbersome, but it was a very specific protocol to making a film. And now we can shoot something and turn it around immediately. And I'm not talking about videotape. I'm talking about where you do cinema mode acquisition on digital cameras with really good lenses and craft the light. And I think by working in film, it helped me understand how to craft the light more for digital, lighting by my eye, and understanding, oh, that's not going to be a problem. Have these mixed sources, different color temperatures, shutter speed because of flicker, things like that. So in a way, it makes it easier for me now. I don't have to have the big budgets. I just finished a little project this past week that's now going into full-time animation, old-fashioned rotoscope animation, but we turned it around in a week, whereas before it would have been a much longer turnaround time and much more expensive, and it was a PSA for sea turtles, and we really wanted to help out this organization, but it didn't cost anywhere near as much as it would have had I shot that on motion picture film.
Nice. And, talking about projects, what are some of your most memorable projects?
Well, I have to say working on When We Last Spoke was one of my favorite all-time projects for several reasons. I had a wonderful cast, and these two little girls, Darby Camp and Chandler Head, who were just so wonderful to work with. I got to work with Melissa Gilbert, and she was a child actress herself, so she was a great asset to the production because she worked with those kids, and I think they got stellar notes from Melissa because they'd wander off and do rehearsals and then come to me, and then we'd rehearse further. But I think that that was such a great project. And then I also had Cloris Leitchman, who was a hoot, and she loved the crew. And we loved her back. And how often you get I think she had 7 Emmys and an Academy Award and Golden Globes. I mean, just so talented. So that was a fun project. We were also recreating the 1960s, and that's always fun with clothing and production design and cars and music. We got to use music from Nat King Cole and Elvis Presley and Herman's Hermits. So that was a fun project, and I love doing that, where you get to kind of create this environment, this world that's not of today.
Any funny moments on set that you can recall?
Well, I don't know if this was funny, but we had a scene. Oh, there's my puppy. Hello, Ella. we had a scene where the two young ladies, Darby Camp and Chandler Head, had to push Cloris Leitchman around in a chair. And Cloris was 90 years old, 91 at the time. And my biggest concern was her getting dumped out of the chair and onto the ground. So we had to really make sure those kids understood. Come here, Ella. Hello? Come. Sorry about that. Welcome to my world. So that we didn't dump Cloris Leitchman out on the floor and break her hip or do something catastrophic like that. So that was a fun moment. And when I saw that it was working, and I was standing at the monitor, and my gaffer Frank McGuff was standing next to me. He had the biggest smile on his face, and I looked around briefly, and the whole crew was just in that moment. I was playing music of a little speaker system while Cloris was dancing with the girls. And that was a highlight. That was just a wonderful moment in time that I will never forget.
What's your most embarrassing moment on set?
Embarrassing moment on set. Oh, I've had so many. It's oof. Trying to think. I did have a faux pas. It was like a bad mistake where I was filming something at the Tony Awards, and I was on the red carpet. It was for a documentary, and some pretty amazing people were in front of me, and Tony Award-winning folks. Anyway, long story short, I deleted the media by accident. And you know what? It worked out just fine because we wouldn't have had releases from them anyway. But I was, deleted the media. But that was a lesson learned. And you get going so fast that sometimes you don't have your wits about you. And so I have to remind myself, slow down, slow down, slow down. Nothing's worse than losing the footage or the shot. You'll get it. Just slow down, breathe.
What are some things that you'd like to see change in the industry?
Well, I'm glad that everything's becoming more and more accessible to young people. When I started out, the cameras were $250,000 and everything cost so much to do. And so the only way you really had access is if you were either in the educational chain and you were given access to these cameras, and or you worked someplace where you had access to the cameras. And now you can do stuff on a phone. And there was an Ivan Reitman film with the little snowman that was just done. That was fantastic. And that was Ivan Reitman, who's this Academy Award-winning director. But the access to the tools, I think, and the young people today have this access, and they're 10-year-olds that are making great little movies, which is frustrating too, because I'm finding myself having to compete with people who aren't charging market value for what they do. And so it's difficult enough to be a filmmaker and make a living, but it's even more difficult when you have people undermining or underbidding your work, and you have 40 years of experience in the industry, and then someone who's just starting out will do it for 1/3 the price. And so next thing you know, how do you make a living with all the skills that you have if the client can't discern from this person who comes in just with raw experience versus someone who comes in truly having been on any level and all levels of production? So that's been kind of a difficult thing. And maybe that's another reason why I'm gravitating more towards the features, is that my level of experience is such that I really can't do some of the smaller projects anymore. It's just not worth my time or energy. And I have so many things that I'm doing. I tell people I'm spinning plates or juggling flaming bowling balls, but trying to get a lot of big projects off the ground. And that's kind of where I'm hyper-focusing now, on the bigger, long-form projects that will engage me for long periods of time to produce and direct.
Tell me a little bit about some of your passion projects and the social issues you feel the need to address.
It's interesting. It started out when I started going to this inner city church where there was people that were literally walking across the street from the projects to attend church, and they'd be wearing a Bojangles uniform and getting ready to go second shift, sitting next to someone who was a city council member or actually even Congress people, all in this one place. And what I was trying to do at the time was just kind of get a better sense of the world and how and its makeup from a educational standpoint and from a privilege standpoint or access to things standpoint. So I learned a lot by going there and sitting next to people that had nothing. I mean, they were scrounging to get their next meal, and some of them were homeless. So by being in those environments, it opened my eyes and my heart to other types of storytelling. And so I started doing nonprofit work for homeless shelters or after-school programs and places where I could make a story that would probably impact more people than if I went and served at the homeless shelter. Although I would go and serve at the homeless shelter to kind of get a sense of this is the story to tell, or I'd work in the after-school program to see how reading did help these kids kind of break through the cycle of poverty because they were being informed and educated and enlightened and given opportunities to stay in school and figure out their lives. So I do think that by traveling, seeing the world, being able to step out of myself, I've kind of gleaned a lot and turned those into these stories, these short stories that become passion projects. And one passion project that I finished was, I think it was about 5 years in the making, and it was a documentary where I followed half a dozen at-risk kids that were in a performing arts school, and they were tapped to put on a production of The Color Purple. It was an all-black cast. These kids, great talent, but in addition to that, great attitudes. We worked very closely with them, following them for several years as they had the skills and learned the roles, and we were cast, and then we rehearsed, and then they performed, and then they went to the International Thespian Festival, and then the teacher went to the Tony Awards. So it was kind of one of these, it was a perfect storm of all these things that kind of came together, and it was a really remarkable project. It's a documentary called Purple Dreams, and so proud of that, and proud of the story and the impact that it's had. And now there's a nonprofit wrapped around it called the Arts and Powers, and that's used to help other groups, nonprofit groups that can help kids. So it's kind of goes on. It doesn't stop. It's continuing to be out there in the public and hopefully changing hearts and minds.
Absolutely. What did it feel like to win your first Emmy?
Oh, that was fun. That was fun. It's always good to get the bling. And it's acknowledgement that your work is valued, and you don't do it for the awards, but when the awards come, it's kind of acknowledgement that, hey, I think people are noticing this work and saying, good job. So it doesn't really get you any more money or get you any more fame or notoriety, but it certainly does look good on a shelf.
How do you like to celebrate your successes?
Oof. It's funny. I don't really celebrate them. I just kind of acknowledge that this is good, and I'm so busy moving on to the next thing. Every once in a while, I slow down, take a couple breaths. I haven't had a vacation in a while. Well, I did go to New York on a creative retreat, and part of that was just seeing some Broadway shows, going to a lot of the museums, International Center for Photography and the Metropolitan. And so I guess that's the way I celebrate, is by rewarding myself with something that I can look back and say, I learned that and enjoyed that show and treated myself to some expensive Broadway tickets. So that was a good reward for a very busy year last year.
And you like to sail, right?
Oh, I mean sailing, yeah. that's kind of fun. And I equate, to a degree, equate sailing with directing, is that you're at the helm. You know you got to get to there, but you have to go a couple different ways and different decks to get there, and you have to kind of lead a team, and everybody has their role and responsibility, but you need to know what they're doing and guide them and say, okay, we're going to tighten the main, and we're going to release the jib, and we're going to come about, and we're going to sail in this direction, and we need to tack here to tack there to get to there. So that's kind of what directing is. It's really being a good communicator and having a vision for what you want to do and how you're going to get there, and having a good team around you to do it.
Nice. And being a woman, you must take a great deal of pride in being such a strong voice to others out there that, you know, want the same opportunities. What's your mission and message of encouragement for women?
Never let someone say you can't do that because you're a woman. I remember when I was first starting out in the film business and getting behind a motion picture camera and shooting, and I had some good people around me to help me as far as learning the technology and learning the equipment and understanding exposures and all the technical. But some people from the outside were like, well, who shot that? Or who did that? And I did. No, who shot that? Well, I did. I really had somebody push back on me multiple times, not believing that I actually did the camera work. And it just had to kind of walk away because they just didn't understand it. And then what was nice is, and this was, gosh, I have to think about this. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. Kodak started recognizing me, and I was working with the Kodak team, and they would send me new film that was being developed, and I was a beta test site for them, and would load up a mag of 35 millimeter and do different tests and run it through the gamut of exposures and take it out in the field and work with it. And then I'd sit down with the guys that did the perforations and the people that did the 3 layers of emulsion and did the different technical for how big the grain size is and toe and shoulder and the curve and all this technical stuff. And they were so great, and they embraced me. And I think by Kodak acknowledging me, then others kind of followed suit. So to a degree, I really am sad that we're not shooting film as much as we used to, but it was certainly exposure, no pun intended, but exposure to the industry and to filmmaking and to cinema in a good way for me, and in a time when very few women were doing what I was doing.
Nice. And someone who is an aspiring filmmaker, what would you say is your best advice for them?
Persistence, 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 patience, patience, patience. Some of my projects have taken 10, 12 years to get off the ground. Some of them never get completed. Some of them sit on a shelf because I couldn't get the rights and clearances or afford the rights and clearances. But never give up, and be true to yourself, and don't compromise. There's a big part of it. Do not compromise. Make sure you do it the way that you want to do it, but also don't sell yourself out.
What's the future of Joanne?
Future. Right now, I'm developing a 7-part series, 2 feature films, and an ongoing series with different executive producers and different projects in different places, and a feature-length documentary. So I have a lot of different irons in the fire. The future is I will probably die before all of these are made, but I hope I get to explore and do these projects and really have the great joy of seeing some of these end up in a theater with a live audience watching.
Nice. Lastly, what's the legacy that you want to leave the world?
I hope that people say, she was a good person. She made a difference. I think that's just that I embrace all and that I welcome all and that I am a creator and a collaborator, but that I was a nice along the way and made a difference along the way.
Joanne, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, you're more than welcome, and it's great being here with you. I guess 20 some years ago, you were an intern of mine, and I love seeing my interns get out in the world and make a living in the business. And it's a nice tribute to the sharing idea that we have a lot of information to share and we share it with others, and that helps people create their journey and their career. So yay for you, Justin. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.